Chapter 20. So what is a hypothesis? They are working models. We adapt temporarily. After analyzing a set of data, if the results support a hypothesis, does that prove the hypothesis is true? Explain. So no, we cannot prove a null hypothesis because we don't know if it's true, but we can fail to reject. With the mindset of innocent until proven guilty. So then, after analyzing a set of data, if the results are inconsistent with a hypothesis, does that prove the hypothesis is false? No. It just means, I also forgot to highlight the last question on that last page. You do need the other one. Okay, anyways, no, it just means there's not enough evidence to support the hypothesis, but doesn't necessarily mean it's incorrect. What does it mean to reject a hypothesis? If the probability of seeing results is really low, we reject the hypothesis. And you need to highlight 3 and 4. When testing a hypothesis, always start by assuming that the null hypothesis is true. What is meant by the null hypothesis? It specifies a population model, parameter of interest, and produces a value for that parameter. Given a null hypothesis, P equal to P0, what are the parameters of the normal sampling distribution model? Under what conditions is this model appropriate? So standard deviation is equal to square root of PQ over N, where P is the proportion from the null hypothesis. And you need to highlight that one. How would you determine whether a particular value of p hat is so unlikely to have occurred that you would reject the null hypothesis? If it is greater than or equal to 2 z-scores away from the mean, and not that you necessarily need to like memorize these, but you just need to understand that that's true, and it'll be the same thing for 8. Why do we say fail to reject the null hypothesis rather than accept the null hypothesis? And that's because there is not enough evidence to accept, but also not enough to reject. Three more. Huh? Just like you don't necessarily need to memorize them. Like it won't be asked directly as a question, but you need to understand that to help answer math questions. So just like make sure you know them without, like you don't have to memorize it, but understand the.
So I need 3, 4, and 6.
Yes. And then 7 and 8, just make sure you know for the standpoint of using them to help answer the math questions that are asked. So what is meant by an alternative hypothesis? And we represent that with HA. It contains the values of the parameter that we consider possible if we reject the null hypothesis what is meant by a p-value? It is the probability of observing a value for a test statistic at least as far from the hypothesized value as the statistic, not static, statistic value actually observed if the null hypothesis is true. And you'll need to highlight 9 and 10. And then explain the difference between a two-sided alternative hypothesis and a one-sided one. I'm not worried about the sketch part because we did that already in the notes somewhere. But a one-sided is when we are only interested in deviations in one direction away from the hypothesized value. Two-sided is when we are interested in deviations either direction away from the hypothesized value. And that's it for that.